Now, the opening chapter of an occasional series about inequality in America. It's a subject that's getting more attention in light of the weak economy and the ongoing debate around budget cuts and raising revenues. Billionaire businessman and philanthropist Warren Buffett, who has argued in favor of higher taxes on the wealthiest, cited the growing disparity in an interview on PBS last night with Charlie Rose.
It should be a land of opportunity, and people that get rich, nobody's going to confiscate everything or anything of the sort, but the distribution in this country, market system has led to extremes. A guy that's wired like me, I don't have any special status in this world. I'm a great nurse, a great teacher, maybe much more valuable to society than I am. I'm wired so that I can figure out what things are worth.
Allocate capital.
Yeah, so I get super rich, and somebody whose adenoids are in a certain arrangement gets rich, but television makes a lot of people rich. I mean, Lou Gehrig held out for $25,000 in the late 30s. They benched him. They didn't bench him because he had break his streak, but he had a long struggle. Television has made the 230 hitter or the 240 hitter, better than Ted Williams at 406. So there's a lot of serendipity in this. Everybody in this country owes their good fortune in some way to the rest of the country.
NewsHour economics correspondent Paul Solman has been looking into the reality and impact of the wealth gap in the U.S. today. Here's the first of several stories, part of his ongoing reporting, Making Sense of Financial News.
Near Times Square, at the line for late show tickets, we borrowed David Letterman's audience for a short quiz on economic inequality.
So this is three different societies. It's the distribution of wealth in the societies. Where do you think these three places are?
In each chart, we explained, yellow represents the richest fifth of the population, blue the second richest, and so on down to orange, the poorest fifth. Which chart, we asked, represents the distribution of wealth in the United States?
So this one's exactly equally distributed from the top to the bottom.
In the first chart, each 1/5 of the population has 20% of the wealth. In the middle pie chart, a middling amount of inequality. The richest fifth owns 36%, the poorest fifth only 11%. And in the third chart, extreme inequality, where the richest fifth owns 84% of the nation's wealth, while the bottom 2/5, 40% of the population, owns an almost invisible 0.3% of the nation's property.
Which one do you think the United States is?
I might say this one.
You think the United States is completely equal? 20%, 20%?
It's not exactly equal, but that might be my guess that that'd be the closest. Or maybe this one. It's one of the top two.
And you?
Maybe the middle.
What? The United States would be the middle?
I think the middle is U.S.
Middle one is U.S., middle one is U.S., middle one is U.S. Which one would you think the U.S. was?
Hopefully that.
This would have to be third world. This would have to be places like India.
A place that would be incredibly unequal, right?
Yeah.
Definitely. The US would be here.
U.S. would be here, and this one?
I don't think that exists.
At least he got that one right. The completely equal pie economy is completely made up. The middle pie represents the wealth distribution of Sweden. The bottom pie? We asked two presumably low-income workers near the tourist line for Letterman.
What place would have a distribution like this? What
United States. United States.
United States.
Yes, this chart represents the land of opportunity, ours.
The study had a few different parts to it.
Psychologist Dan Ariely designed the quiz. First consistent finding, most Americans don't realize how unequal our country really is.
People don't understand how much wealth the top 20% have. They actually have 84% of the wealth and they think they have much less. And more disturbingly, people don't understand how little wealth the bottom of the distribution have. The bottom 40% of the US have about 0.3% of the wealth, basically zero, and people think they have much more than that.
But how can that be, given the spread of McMansions and luxury brands in America's wealthy communities, so easy to contrast with almost any poor neighborhood in the country? Harvard Business School professor David Moss.
people look around them at their local communities, and local communities tend to be more equal than the broader society. And so as they look around, that's essentially their judgment, or our judgment. I should include myself, see the same thing.
So there isn't that much inequality in Newton, Massachusetts, where you live, for example?
Much less than in the society as a whole.
Maddie McWilliams, who attends high school in upscale Newton, agrees.
It's getting easier for people to ignore the inequality. They can stay far away from it.
Insulate themselves.
Yeah, I think so.
Another reason people don't realize the extent of inequality, most of it is explained by gains at the tippy top. Harvard economist Richard Freeman.
In the last 30 years or so, the share of national income that has gone to the upper 0.1%, not to the upper 1%, 0.1%, rose by 10 percentage points. That is one of the most astounding patterns I've ever seen in data.
0.1%.
0.1%, yes. People sometimes say, oh, the rich, it's the upper 10%. It's the upper 5%. No. This is the 0.1%. Warren Buffett has this wonderful statement where he says, yes, there's been a class war in the United States, and my class, namely the super rich people, have won.
A graphic recent example, this New York Times online slideshow of children's playhouses, which can cost up to $250,000. Meanwhile, more and more Americans, millions of them, can't afford their own homes.
My house is in foreclosure. I owe them at least $100,000 more than my house is worth, probably closer to $150,000 more than my house is worth.
Are they coming to take it away?
At some point they will. They haven't yet, but at some point they will.
And then where will you go?
I have no idea. I try not to think about it because I really have no idea.
Denise Barrent has a college degree from Lehigh University, some master's level courses, and a paralegal certificate. She once had a job at a health insurance company paying $80,000 a year, plus a part-time job just for fun, she says, selling clothes at Talbot's. But for 3 years, she's been unemployed, free-falling out of the middle class and into poverty, living in a well-to-do Boston suburb she could once afford.
Even the organizations that were helping people before have been stretched so much that they're having a hard time helping people.
You mean it's hard for you to find a food pantry?
There's one the next town over. And it was funny, I remember the first time I went, the people were like, well, you don't look like you should be here.
Don't have a lot of college grads like yourself at the food pantry.
I'm sure they didn't at the beginning, but I'm sure they do now.
Barrent's situation has deteriorated since we first interviewed her earlier this year, and she said this.
The top 1% is living well, and they don't get it.
One of her fellow interviewees was security guard Bobby Hicks.
15 years ago, I was working as an office products delivery truck driver.
And you were doing better doing that than you are now?
Yes, absolutely.
Though Hicks was born in America, Christy Pierre-Louis in Haiti, her job frustration echoes his.
It makes me feel like the American dream is not just, is not for me. It's just not for me. Maybe it's for the wealthy, just not for me. Because it doesn't matter how I reach, I'm reaching out my hand and it seems like I'm still just very far away from it. It's like someone literally pulling it as much as I'm running after it, they're running away with it. And I don't get my piece of the American dream because I work hard in this country too. I pay my taxes just like everyone else. I work here, I go to school, and I'm doing my best, but still my best is just not good enough.
So the U.S. looks unequal to a Haitian? Economist Richard Freeman is not surprised.
We're high for a poor country in terms of inequality, and we're a rich country. We're about the same level of inequality as China. And of course, China, half the population are rural peasants, are not part of the modern world. And if we were to compare us with African countries, dictators in different places, taking a lot of the wealth from normal people, we would be among the top half of the African countries of inequality. So the U.S. really is reached an extraordinary level of income inequality.
The luxury goods speak for themselves. But who knew that the kids of the wealthy were flying private jets to camp this summer? Okay, to some, this might be cause for indignation. But to others, it's not that simple.
Inequality is the flip side of providing powerful incentives for people who generate a lot of income.
Economist Stephen Davis.
Part of the success of the United States economy lies in the fact that if you succeed in a big way commercially, you're rewarded for that, and the taxes on your success are modest, say, compared to what they are in a country like France or in the Scandinavian countries.
But as Dan Ariely found in part 2 of his study, and as our own informal survey confirmed, when people didn't know which countries the pie charts represented, they overwhelmingly chose the one representing a much more equal and yet still prosperous country, Sweden, as the place they'd prefer to live. A function of their politics, we wondered?
We had 7,000 people distributed around the US, different levels of income, education, wealth, political opinions. 92% of the Americans picked Sweden over the US. When we broke it by Democrats and Republicans, Democrats it was 93%, Republican it was 90.5%. So there's a difference, but the difference is tiny. And one of the possibilities is that when we dig deep down and we ask people to examine their core beliefs about a just society, Americans are really quite consistent in terms of thinking this is way too much inequality and we want something that is much more equal to Sweden.
And so, last question, which distribution do you prefer?
Which society do you want to live in?
I'm going to go with this one, though.
You want to be in the unequal society?
Sure.
On the off chance that you'll be in the yellow?
You can let us know online.
Paul's next report examines the connections between the growing wealth gap and the financial crisis.